It's not feeling a whole lot like fall where I am, but the calendar's telling me otherwise, so we're just gonna go with it. We're gonna do mushroom and barley soup today. That's a old favorite from the Jewish delis, something else that's disappearing a little bit too quickly. This is a very easy soup, but there's just a few little things you wanna do to make sure you've got the biggest punch of flavor possible. So let's just start by dicing up our vegetables and have a look at that. I'm gonna start with the carrots. I know your recipe shows that we're using 1 carrot. My carrots are on the small side, so I'm probably gonna go with a little bit more than 1. You know, this isn't baking. You can adjust things the way you like. If you don't like carrot at all, use a lot less. Leave it out even. You could do that, it changes up flavors, but it's what you like. So we've peeled the carrots already. I'm gonna take the tip off. I'm gonna take the top off. And we're looking to dice in small pieces, nice fine dices. Carrot being a round vegetable, it's a lot easier to have a flat surface. So I'm cutting the carrot in half. I'm going to put the flat surface down on my board. And remember, we talked about knife grips before. Thumb on one side, your fingers on the other. You're not all the way up on the blade, you're not all the way back on the handle. A grip like this gives you the best control you're going to get. So I'm going to cut my carrot again. I want it a little bit smaller. I'm going to cut it 3 times. And then just notice I'm rocking my knife. I'm not moving this end a whole lot. I'm moving my hand. And I'm gently, carefully feeding the carrot in with my other hand. And we have these nice small dice here. You can do that again, show you how it works. On the flat side, do nice small strips and rock your knife across, minimal movement. When we get to the thicker end of the carrot, it's the same idea. We're just going to cut it in more pieces. Flat side down. Stability, what you're looking for is stability most of the time. And rock the knife, and we get small dice. All right, now we're going to chop up the onion we need. We only need about a cup of an onion, so I think that's about half of this, but that's why we measure. So when you start with a whole onion, first thing you want to do is slice off the tip and then cut your onion in half. This makes it easier to peel, gives you a good start. Leave the root end intact. That's important to cutting up the onion neatly and cleanly. So since we also want fine dice here, we're going to cross-hatch the onion. Now watch how this works. We're going to take the tip of our knife and we're going to make close cuts down the length of the onion. Again, leaving the root ends intact. Now, holding your hand on top of the onion and keeping your thumb out of the way of your blade, cut parallel to your board. Again, keeping the root end of the onion intact. And when you've done that, you can just slice down the center and you've got these nice little dice of onion. You can't quite rock the knife the same way as you could with the carrot because the height of the onion prevents that, but the idea is still similar. Right, let's move on to the mushrooms. This is an 8-ounce container of cremini mushrooms. They are also called baby bellas sometimes. You can use white button mushrooms if that's what's available to you. It's not a big deal. A little more flavor in the creminis. Maybe, I don't know if there's that much of a texture difference, but I do think maybe because these are baby bellas, you get a little bit of that meatiness that you might get from portobello mushrooms. Now, you do not have to soak your mushrooms. Yes, they're grown in dirt, and yes, there's probably going to be some dirt on them. If you soak your mushrooms, they're going to absorb water from the tap, which means they won't be absorbing water so much from your soup and your flavorful liquids. If you do feel that your mushrooms are not as clean as you would like, you can just take a paper towel and brush them off, and that works just fine. So what we're going to do with the mushrooms is, and don't get rid of the stems. The stems are flavorful, they're tasty, and they're good. So just cut off the end, and we want to slice these thickly. It's not going to be a quick little saute. We're making soup out of this, so we want to have something in here. It's not a clear broth. It's a good chunky fall soup. And looking at a larger mushroom like this, it's a matter of taste. I don't mind getting a nice big chunk of mushroom in there, but if you feel that might be distracting, cut the mushroom in half and cut your slices like this. Clove of garlic. Easy way to peel a clove of garlic. Put it on your board. Take your chef's knife with the blade pointing away from you. Put the garlic closer to the heel where you've got more width. And just press down. Sometimes it goes more easily than others. You have a smashed clove of garlic. Skin peels right off. All you need to do here is cut the end off and just mince. Again, fingers tucked under, turn it around, and walk your blade across the garlic. Gather it back together with the back edge of your knife and walk across the garlic. This end of my knife is barely moving. My hand is doing the work, my right hand on the knife. And really, it's not my hand that's doing the work, it's the knife that's doing all the work. That's a pretty decent mince. We need a teaspoon. And I actually have some Romanian heritage, so I tend to prefer a lot of garlic in everything. It was honestly a prerequisite for marrying my husband. If he wasn't a garlic fan, it wasn't going to happen. Okay, so we have a measured teaspoon of garlic, and we can put the rest away for later. Here is the key to the soup. The fresh mushrooms are lovely. They give you texture, they give you flavor. Dried mushrooms pack an umami punch like you wouldn't believe. These particular mushrooms, they can be a little bit challenging to find outside of heavily Jewish areas. If you all remember Wallbaum's chain in New York, this is where I originally used to buy them, at Wallbaum's, when I lived in Brooklyn a lot of years ago. I have not seen them anywhere else in stores except near my mother-in-law in Florida, because everybody from that end of Brooklyn and Queens moved down to that end of Florida. So they stock these mushrooms there. You can get them online. I think Fresh Direct has them. Some other places might. But the real key is they taste very similar to porcini mushrooms, which cost a fortune. This container was 1 ounce. It cost me $3 and change. And this is what it looks like. I don't think you can get it for $3 and change anymore, but it's still under $5, and that is still an absolute bargain for what you're getting. And we're going to use it in 2 ways. I soaked the mushrooms in boiling water about 20 minutes, half hour ago, and we are going to drain those mushrooms. I'm going to use my hands. My hands are clean. I've been washing. However, if it makes you squeamish, by all means use a strainer, but whatever you do not get rid of this liquid. This is important. The flavor is infused in there, and it is going to do amazing things for your soup. So what you want to do is get the mushrooms out, squeeze them, reserve the liquid. Again, feel free to use a strainer if you're more comfortable with that. Put that aside, and we're going to also give these mushrooms a rough chop. Now I've got my Dutch oven heating over medium to medium-high flame. I'm melting a tablespoon of butter to saute the vegetables. If you would prefer to stay dairy-free, through reasons of kashrut or health, use olive oil, use vegetable oil, no reason not to. If those are not a concern for you, the butter does add a little bit more flavor, but it's only a tablespoon, so oil will be just fine. We have the butter melted, so we're going to add in the carrots and onion. We're going to give those a good stir. Make sure everything's coated with oil. And we're going to saute that until the onions are starting to wilt.
Okay.
All right, onions are looking like they've softened up quite a bit. Picking up a little color from the carrots. That's not really so much color from the pan. We don't want them to color. We're just trying to wilt them. We're not trying to fry them. All right, so we're going to add the minced garlic. And that takes about 30 seconds. You really just want to wait until the garlic's fragrant, until you can smell it. So now we're going to add the fresh mushrooms. I'm going to saute these about 5 to 10 minutes. We want these to color. And the thing with cooking mushrooms is they're going to go through a few stages. They're going to start giving off first off, they're going to suck up all the oil in your pan, and you're going to think you've got a problem. You don't. After they've done that, you keep cooking, they're going to start giving off all their water. And you just keep right on cooking until your your mushrooms are colored and good and soft, about 5 to 10 minutes. Okay. So you saw how dry the pan was looking before. We've been sauteing for a few minutes, and now you can see the mushrooms are starting to give up their liquid. Just barely starting. The color's changing, they don't look raw anymore, and the pan is definitely getting wetter as we talk. So we're going to keep on sauteing for a little bit longer until they've got a really good color on them. While the mushrooms are finishing cooking, let's talk about the broth and the liquid a little. I'm using a 50% reduced sodium beef broth. And by the way, again, if you keep kosher, you can use Manischewitz. I think there's some other kosher brands. It needs to be a brand you like. Whatever brand it is, your call. The reason I tend to use the reduced sodium broths is it lets me control how much salt we put into the recipe at the end. This is our reserved mushroom cooking liquid. What we're going to do is add enough of the broth to make 5 cups. This is a 2-cup measure, so we'll do it a few times. Keep in mind when you're soaking mushrooms, sometimes there can be grit in the bottom of the container of your soaking liquid. You want to make sure that does not get into your soup. So when you pour that out carefully. If it looks like there's grit in the bottom, leave it there, go rinse your cup before you use it again. All right. Looks like the vegetables have softened up and colored nicely. My carrots have softened. The mushrooms look like nice cooked mushrooms. And once you notice on this side of the pan, it looks like maybe I've burnt something. I haven't really. That's called the fond. That's all the really good caramelized flavor from the vegetables that have chosen to stick to the pan. When we get the liquid in there and bring it to a boil, that's going to be what we call deglazing. All of that really great flavor stuck to the pan is going to come back into our soup. All right, so now we're going to add the squeezed dried mushrooms, our umami bomb, if you want to call it that, and the barley. Barley is just plain pearled barley like you get any supermarket, nothing special about it. That is going to suck up a lot of liquid. That's what it does. That's going to expand quite a bit. Get a little bit of the oil on there. And now we're going to get our broth in. Remember, this is the one that has all the mushroom liquid in there. There's still a few pieces of mushrooms. But I'm pouring it slowly because you can see there's a little bit of debris in the bottom there. And we're just going to leave that and get rid of it. And let's pour. And there's our 5th cup. We're going to let our soup come to a boil, stir it through, let it come to a boil. When it comes to a boil, we are going to cover it with the lid ajar and simmer for an hour to let all the flavors meld and to let the barley cook. The soup's just about reaching a boil now. Let's season with salt and pepper. Don't go all the way. You know, you can always add more salt. You cannot take it out. So we'll get some salt and pepper in there so we can start building layers of flavor. Stir that through. All right, the soup's at a good boil right now. We're going to put the lid on a jar, turn the heat down to simmer, and we'll have to watch that and adjust the heat in the beginning just to make sure it stays at a simmer. And then we'll come back to check on the soup in about an hour. An hour later, and here we are back with our soup. You'll see I have the lid fully on it this time. That's because I was checking back on the soup regularly, and at about 45-50 minutes, it looked to me like the soup was thickening up a little too much. So what I did was I put the lid on fully, turned the heat down even lower, and let it finish cooking that way. You have to judge based on, you know, what you're seeing, not going by the recipe as if it were written in stone. And my critic, Tony, is agreeing with me. So odds are you're going to need to adjust your seasoning here. One of the safer ways to taste your ingredients. Now, okay, look, you can see how much it did thicken up, how much less liquid there is, and how much the barley has swelled up. So if we want to test for seasoning, a little bit on your spoon, a little bit on your tasting spoon. That way it never touches what's in your mouth, never touches what's in your pot. And no question, it needs more salt and pepper. This is the time to do it. And I use kosher salt for most reasons, most applications, honestly. It's easier to feel in your hand how much you're putting in. And in a hot liquid, certainly it's going to dissolve with no problems. And one of the things you want to remember if you're not serving the soup immediately, it refrigerates just fine. You can double it just fine. And it'll refrigerate very well. It'll even freeze well. However, it's going to continue to thicken as it cools. So if you had leftover broth, hold on to it. You can use it when you reheat your soup to thin it out again. Or you can even use plain water, that's just fine. You might need to adjust your seasonings a little, but you should be tasting before you serve anyhow. That is significantly better, and I'm going to say this is done. While the soup is cooking is a good time to get started on the croutons. We're going to start doing that by making some infused garlic oil. Now remember, we crushed the garlic last time to mince it. We're not mincing it this time, we're just slicing it. So what we're going to do is just cut off the root end and get some of the skin off with it. Peel the garlic as best you can. If it breaks, it's not a problem. And then slice it lengthwise. We don't need a lot of oil here. We're just going to heat up a tablespoon and a half of olive oil. We're going to toss the garlic clove in there. Going to let it get good and hot, and then we're going to take it off the oil and let it rest for 10 minutes. All right, you can see the olive oil is bubbling around the garlic now. This is hot enough. So we're just going to turn the heat off, take it off the heat, and let it rest for 10 minutes. We don't want. While the garlic oil is infusing, let's talk about doing the bread. I made my own rye bread here, and I gave you a recipe for it in the recipe packet. I didn't want to demo making the bread for you. That's for another class if people are interested. But where I live, where a lot of people live, you just can't get decent bread. And I've taken to making a lot of my own breads just because it's a lot better and it's not that difficult. If you do have any questions about making the rye bread, I will be very happy to answer them in the discussion afterwards. But we're going to start taking some of our rye bread, and yes, I do like seeded. If you don't like seeded, that's fine, don't use it. Serrated knife, because that's better for cutting bread. Same grip though, never want to do this. Always a pinch grip. Slices are cut about 1 inch thick. The croutons can be whatever size you like, but I'm going to go for big and chunky because I think it fits the big and chunky profile of the soup very well. And I'm just going to toss the bread cubes into a heat-proof bowl because our oil is going to still be hot when we're ready to use it. And we'll wait on our garlic oil to be ready. The garlic's been sitting in the oil for 10 minutes, so we're going to just take the cloves out. And if you like, it's poached garlic. You could snack on it, but right now I'm just going to get rid of that. And we're just going to toss the cut bread cubes with the olive oil. You're not trying to soak your cubes here. You don't want an oil-sodden mess. You just want them coated. We're just going to put them on a baking sheet, spread them out a bit, and bake at 350 for 15 minutes. And it is a good idea to stir at least once while they're baking. And here we have our mushroom and barley soup. Keep in mind, like I mentioned earlier, you really do want to reserve some of that broth or have a little extra water. The barley is going to soak up your liquid like you won't believe. It's a good thick bowl of soup. It is exactly what you need on a good, cool winter's day. And on your croutons, I also want to remind you, don't be afraid of color. It's a really common mistake that home cooks make is to pull their baked goods out of the oven too soon. You definitely want to get some color on there. Color equals flavor. So get some good crunchy croutons, put them in your soup, and you've got a really great early fall winter meal. And thanks so much for listening to this demo. Look forward to speaking with you in a few minutes.